Yeah, we're live. It is 7:22. A little on the late side. It's all good. That's because I was busy putting up another video and I just loaded that up. It is on the LT1 that I ran. So Westech had, for those of you who don't know the story, Westech had an LT1 that they discovered hidden somewhere, tucked under a cabinet or something. And it hadn't been run in a really, really long time. In fact, nobody even remembered when the last time it was run, and they didn't remember that they ran it. Nobody did. It might be a couple of decades. So I told them, look, I will buy it as long as you let me put it up and run it and make sure that it's okay. I said, okay, because it's not. We don't know I don't know what would have happened to it if I didn't buy it. Maybe it'd have been thrown away. Then I could just take it out of the garbage, which would have been nice. Should have been a much better deal. At any rate, though, I got the motor, and so we didn't know if it ran. I didn't know if it had a broken piston in it or rod. If it did spin over. I checked that. I rotated it, and it looked like it had it still had plugs in it and stuff. Had an intake manifold on. It was very, very dirty. But as it turned out, I went to clean it off, but it was basically just dust from age sitting there. And so it was not really greasy or anything. So it was really nice. It was in good shape. And when you looked inside, I had to take the manifold off because we ran, and we're going to talk about this, but I had to take the EFI manifold off, the factory LT1 manifold off, and we ran it with a carburetor just because it was easy for me to configure, because I just wanted to do a quick thing on there and get it up and get it running. As it turned out, it was, as these always are, it turned out to be a lot more involved because I had to find a water pump, and then I didn't have the sleeve, and so I had to force feed it, and I wanted to change the oil, and one of the spark plugs broke, and so we had, it's just lots of little things. But we eventually got it on there and got it running. Hello, baby, hello. We eventually got it running, and the video is up right now, so you guys can go check that out. And there's nothing more when you're running. I don't know if you guys have run things on the dyno, or even when you're starting it for the first time at your house. There's nothing more exciting than to have the thing fire up and also like take throttle. So if it starts up and it's like blah 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 blah, blah and just getting all crazy and nuts and not doing great. Oh, there you go. That's not exciting. But when you start it up and it it revs up, and it's like, oh, it's doing all the things that it's supposed to do. I didn't know what the timing was. I knew roughly, and the nice thing about starting something like that up on the dyno, especially a carbureted one, we hook up the MSD, we plug it in because we have an ignition amplifier that plugs into the distributors. Very rarely do we run ready to run distributors that have coils, and we hook up the coil wire and stuff. But they always run through the 6AL or Digital 7. So we hooked that up, hooked the carburetor up, got fuel to it. And when I set the distributor in, you just set the balancer, with number 1 at TDC. And then I usually advance it, 20 degrees or something, 20 or 25 degrees. And then line up number 1 with number 1 and then tighten it down. And then when you start it, it really, to get it to start on the dyno, it could be at 0. It could be at 45, anywhere kind of in there. If it starts up at 0 or 5 or 10 or whatever, usually it doesn't run as well, but it'll still start and run. And so, when you start it up and you're running, you're like, oh, that's even kind of close-ish on the timing. That's working okay. So here's a little behind the scenes thing that I did when we were running that motor on the dyno. On my first pull, in fact, when I loaded in, the power was terrible. It was, and I think I put this in the video, that it was only 225 horsepower or something. It was awful. I'm like, wow, this thing is not stellar, and it sounds terrible now. I'm like, I wonder what the heck happened to it. And then I went in and checked the timing, and what had happened is I didn't tighten the distributor all the way down, and the distributor had moved, and it had moved the timing back to 0. So it was at TDC. So it had no advance at all. And it still ran, and it would still take load and run through a whole sweep. It just didn't make any power. And then I put the timing back to where, back to some reasonable amount. And hey, look, all the power came back magically. And then I did the same thing that I did with the video that I did on the small block, on the L98 small block. We did the same thing there, where I just started advancing until it decided that, hey, look, I don't need any more timing. This is as much as I need, and this is where I'm going to make power. And then I took off the Holley carburetor and put the VRS carburetor on there. not because I was trying to do a carburetor comparison, because I didn't do that. I would have needed to be able to do that, and that's something I might like to do later on. But because we had the 650 Ultra XP, but I didn't jet it, and it needed a lot of jetting because it was very, very rich at lower engine speeds on the load in and stuff. And so I would have had to do a bunch of jetting. And I thought, you know what, this is a good time to try that Edelbrock VRS carburetor, because I had never done it. And they had a 650. And so I just put that on there, and that because of whatever jetting it has in it, the way that it came out of the cabinet, because I have no idea what the last thing that Brule ran this thing on, but it was very close. So I just did a carburetor swap, and then we played with the timing, and with that carburetor, it did very, very well. It did everything that we would want it to do. It was near 340 horsepower and a good bit over 400 foot-pounds of torque. And so it did very well. And now it is a running, workable unit. So and this will be the poll for tonight. What is it you're barking at? Is running the LT1 with a carburetor ruin the value of the test? So is running the LT1 with a carburetor instead of the EFI manifold, does it completely like negate the value of the test? So we'll see. I get that a lot. Why'd you run with the carburetor? This is a EFI motor and you didn't run with the factory manifold. I know I didn't, because I couldn't right now. Next time I will be able to. In fact, that will be one of the first tests, is to compare the carbureted manifold versus the factory LT1 manifold when we're able to run it fuel injected, because that's an easy test. That's just an intake swap. That's nothing. I didn't. GW, you didn't finish the video yet. And a couple of other things that happened while I was testing this is, one of them, when I first went to put water in it, because I'd started the motor up with no water in it. I just wanted to make sure if it was, if it was working, if it was alive, and it was. And then when I put water in it, it leaked water out of the back of the block. Hang on, I'll play a video so you can watch it. I got to go see what's going on with my dog. I can't do that. Brady, what are you doing? Come here. Come on up here. So what I had to do was, one of the freeze plugs in the back of the block was leaking. It had rusted through, and so I just had to knock that one. I had to take the motor back off the dyno, but it was still in the cherry picker, so it was not that hard. Just have to take one of the headers off and unbolt everything and just lay it out of the way and bring it forward. Knock that plug out and put a new one in, and luckily it's just a standard small block Chevy plug, and Westech had some of those, so where I was able to fix that up and get it back together. But again, it's just all like extra time that when you're trying to just, I just get something simple. I'll put a carburetor on this, throw a distributor on it and the intake manifold, and put headers on it, and they'll go up there and run. They'll start. This will be like 30-40 minutes. It'd be no problem. And then the water pump, and then the sleeve on the water pump, and it's just all like multiplying, time consumption. But you guys know, because you've done projects, and so how projects are, and that it's like, endless trips to the auto parts store to get the part, and then to replace the wrong part that they just gave you, and go back and get the right one, and hopefully get the right one. And you have the only one that's weird like that, and all the rest of them aren't like that, so you can't get that one. So, but the nice thing, like I said, is when I took the intake manifold off of the LT1, looking inside it after we'd cleaned the outside of it, looking the inside of it, it was perfect. I mean, it's way nicer than any of the junkyard motors that I ever run. It looked like a brand new motor. I was talking to Jim from TPIS about it and said, this thing might be like that 305. It might be a brand new motor. It might be a production motor that came off the assembly line and went to the Chevy race shop, and then they didn't ever do anything with it. And then Westech got it. And then now I've run it. This thing has run at some time in its life before this, but not very much. So I think it's a brand new LT1, as it turns out, which is way better than it could have gone, because it could have gone that it was a broken LT1, which is why it sat there for so long, that nobody wanted to fix it. Nobody wanted to do anything with it. But it looks like it's going to be a player, which will be cool because then I'll be able to, when we put the crank trigger on it, we'll be able to run it EFI, and we'll be able to run a lot of cool stuff on it, different camshafts and heads and intake manifold. And for us, and for the people here, most of the fun is just being able to run it with boost, which is, always good. The LT1 intake manifold is something that especially back in the day, the L98 guys versus the LT1 guys, you get the LT1 was, relatively speaking, was much shorter and a much higher RPM intake manifold. So you get the argument from both camps. You get like that LT1 manifold is terrible. It doesn't make any torque because it has runner length that are this long. And then the LT1 guy said, yeah, well, why don't you try to rev your L98, past 4,000 RPM and see what happens? Because your runner lengths are, I don't know, 15, 20 inches or whatever they are. They're super long. And so that doesn't make any power. Is there a runner length that can combine the best of both of those? No, there's not. I mean, it would have to be a dual runner thing. And they're so dramatically different in terms of length. And then you guys let me know which one. Let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to see that. Which one do you like better? Do you like the looks of the L98, the tune port manifold? Or do you like this? Because some guys like the cleaner look of the LT1. But let me know which one of those you like better. I myself still think that the L98 intake manifold, the tune port manifold, is probably the weirdest, coolest manifold that they did. The LT1 obviously was a big step up in power. I mean, 300 horsepower versus 250. So it was a big jump in power. It was a serious jump in power. And part of that is because now they had good heads and they could get the thing to rev a little bit more, past 4,500 RPM or 4,800 RPM where they made peak power at. And then it would make more power. So what they needed to do when they did that is then help it, make torque, which it still had a fairly mild camshaft in it, which helped it do that. And it had, the LT1 had a fairly reasonable amount of compression too, which was helped by the fact that it was reverse cooling. So they were cooling the cylinder heads first so they could get away with that. And that helped with the performance. I mean, we have, like I said, 300 horsepower versus 245, or I think was the highest that the L98 got, something in that range, 245 or 250. I think 245. But again, those guys, bickering back and forth about which one of those, the LT1 guys telling you that, oh no, we can make torque with these. Okay, can you? I mean, you can make some. Obviously, that was with the dual plane manifold. So I'll be curious to see if the LT1 is down compared to that. I would think that it would be down compared to the dual plane, especially down at that RPM where the dual plane's making peak torque. The dual planes make really good torque down in that range, even better than some of the really long runner manifolds. Like I say, if we run that on an LS, for instance, the long runner manifolds actually don't make the very low speed power that a dual plane does. So they work pretty well. So I would expect an LT to be down even more compared to that. But it might be that it is better at the top. So that will be an interesting comparison. I'm excited to do that. And then I'm excited to not run a dual plane and run the factory intake manifold with fuel injection. So we can show all of the guys that, hey, look, this is, this is what would happen if you actually had the short runner manifold on there, and this is how it responds. Not that, the camshaft is still going to do the same thing. If you have one cam that makes more low speed power, one cam that makes more high speed power, they're going to do it with both manifolds. But that's the thing, and that's why I asked the question, is that some people think that it only responds that way with that manifold. What are you going to do? So let's see what you guys got going on. LT1, I'm excited about the LT1 because it is other guys. I should have my other guy's shirt on, right? Gen 2 LT1, yes, please. Grubworm did run an LT1. I think he's still doing that. They make like big boy power in that thing. Good to see you guys. Sailor, Tim, Getaway, Eric, Daniel, speed and performance. LT1 350 is a good motor, but the 351 Cleveland does no sound. Yeah, those were not really marketplace competitors, but yeah, I agree. Richard, is Future live in Australia? You want me to come to Australia to do live feeds? I would love to do it. Do they still make the carb intake for the LT1 second gen? That's what I ran a GM carbureted one, but I borrowed it from Bob, one of the viewers. And so Bob, I'd be happy to send that back to you or drop it off, whatever you need. I think grubworm is 430 inches. I think it's going to be GW2. You think it's going to be close in terms of the intake manifold? Do you think that they'll be close in power? Yeah, in fact, one of the Goldens, I think it was Brady, made it on the video that I posted today, because when I was doing the intro or something, he walked in and decided this was a good time to, and you gotta let him be in the video. Might be close on power outputs on both intake, maybe more average power on the carb or peak on the EFI. Cleveland needs a Torrington bearing and shims to stop its lateral movement. Oh, on the camshaft. The real question is, what are the trophies for? Those are for land speed records. The intake valley on that thing looked brand new. It did. It was like I said, it's way cleaner than anything that I normally run. I think that this really is a brand new motor. That intake manifold has never been off from the factory. I know that from taking it off. Junior, happy to help. Thanks for all the help and answering our messages. I'm curious, what is all the needed for the crank trigger setup? Nothing. I mean, well, not nothing, but the Holly sells a crank trigger setup for it. It's just the wheel and the trigger, and the it's adjustable so that you could get it lined up correctly. But it's not, and it bolts onto a small block Chevy. So shout out to Jim at TPIS for reminding me that the LT1, although it has a specific damper on it, it will take a standard small block Chevy. And so I can just put that on and then put the crank trigger on, because Westech might even have a crank trigger for a small block Chevy. I'm sure that they do, but I'll buy one. I think I'm going to buy the 36-1 from Holly. That way we can also use it on the 2.2 Dodge. Class speed records at Bonneville. Yeah, that's what those are for. Even with an LT1, have an issue with it getting up to temperature and it cuts fuel off. I've replaced so much and I have no idea what the cause is. Are you having trouble with the coolant getting up to temperature? No participation trophies? No, they didn't give those for participation. One of the ones up top is a go-kart trophy that I won. Another one might be a US Touring deal. I'd rather have an L98 for less fuss, especially with the reverse flow coolant. Beyond that, an LS. C4 Corvette sweet spot is L98 and a 6-speed. Can you guys help me pick a cam for my 6.2? Yeah, just tell me what are you doing with it and how much power do you want to make, and what is your converter or transmission or whatever all that stuff is, and I can tell you. The TPI looks better and should have gone in a truck. I definitely 100% agree with that. I say this, and I currently own 3 LT1s. Yeah, I don't think the LT1 would be nearly as good a truck motor, but the LT4 is good. But I count the LT4 as an LT1, part of that family. Yeah, LT4 stuff is not cheap. I think I sold the LT4 heads way too cheap. I have a sloppy stage 2 or a Torker V2 cam. I don't know which one to use in a 6.2. What are the specs on the Torker V2? I think that's bigger than a sloppy stage 2. All right, Todd, tuck him in. Tell him good night. It's a big rim G body. Is it a Monte Carlo or a Cutlass? My sloppy stage 2 came with some paint on it. How big can you make a small block Chevy? It depends on if you want to go with altered bore spacing, you can make them pretty big like that. I don't think I've ever seen one with paint on it. We've seen stuff with paint on the in between the journals. Sometimes the cam guys will mark them that way, but not on the lobes. L98 was the coolest looking motor in its time. It killed me to put the mini ram on my 87, but it picked up 3/10 in the quarter. Wow. That's a lot. I mean, in the test that I did on the mini ram versus the L98, obviously the mini ram made more peak power, but it lost quite a bit for a lot of the curve compared to the long runner stuff. Were all the factory Gen 3 LT1s 1.6 factory rocker ratios? Does anybody know the answer to that? I thought that these were 1.5s, but I can't swear to that. Do you need a special distributor for a crank trigger? No. We won't run a distributor. Because we're not going to try to run, we're not going to run, oh no, I take that back. We have to run something, right? I don't know what I was thinking. I can't run that without a distributor. It has to at least distribute spark. So that's not going to solve my problem. Because otherwise the OPTI spark was going to do that. I'm going to have to talk to Eric about that. I can't do that. We can't do that with that intake manifold. Richard, do you think you'll do any more Gen 3 Hemi tests? I would like to. I would very much like to. In fact, I am going to. I'm going to go back to Brian Tooley and do some Hemi testing with them because they have some. I don't have a Hemi right now, but I would like to do more. I like that. I like that engine family. Coolant gets a temp and shuts off and won't start until it sits for a while. Is it getting too hot? Do you have a bad switch or something? A bad thermal switch? Why do people do reverse flow pumps? I don't know about a reverse flow pump, but the LT1 has reverse cooling, meaning that it goes to the heads first and then the block. Richard has gone really fast in the Civic, yes. LT1 question, are you running a mechanical fan, 195-degree thermostat? I always hated the way that, excessive, I always hated the way that the LT1 and LT4s looked. I was a TPI lover. They do look cool. Very, very Klingon warship. I wonder how long it's going to take the Chinese to start building cheaper superchargers that are bigger and displacement for much cheaper than the big guys, just like turbochargers. I don't know. Electric fans, 195-degree thermostat. That should work. Kyle, 408 LS, methanol 950 carb, Super Victor LS3 heads, a 7-angle valve job, 260 at 50, 107. Are the heads ported at all? Imagine a 4-liter Whipple knockoff. That's going to be really hard for them to do twin screw machining there. Winston wants to know, does it do the same thing, that car guy, if you unplug the sensor? .5s on the LT1, only the LT4 had 1.6s. Okay, thank you very much. The G body with 410 gears, 4L60 Torquer V2 is 232, 234. That cam's going to make more power than the sloppy stage 2 does. 3400 stall. Yeah, all of that should work fine. Use coil near plug. Or the LT1s are the ones that had crazy distributors on the front of the cam gear. No, they didn't. An LT4 was just an LT1, but a better version of that. It had different heads and a different intake and apparently different rockers. My 87 C4 had aftermarket heads, cam, and headers. I'm looking at a little altar that has an LT4 heads that have been milled to 11.5 to 1. Unfortunately, no cam specs, but it has a dual plane, 1,800 pounds. Driver went 1020s. Wow. I guess at 1,800 pounds, that's pretty good. Richard, you can run an 0411 LS computer if it's a later LT1 block, but I don't want to run a factory computer. It takes way too long to do the tuning on a factory computer. When are you going to go back, get back to the 5.9 Magnum test? I know that's another one I need to get back to. Would an MSD ignition controller for an LS work on the Gen 2 LT1 with the 24X? It might. Yeah, I don't know how we're going to put a put a 24X on the front, you mean? How much power can a TPI make? Well, which one? A TPI can make a lot of power. If you go look at the video that I did on all my intake manifolds, we ran on a 383 with a big cam and stuff. You can kind of see what's happening there. When you cool the heads first, you can run higher timing. Yeah, you can certainly run higher compression, which... David, I know it's not an LT1. That doesn't matter. But I just built a 400 aluminum heads, 142 Wyand, 208, 212, custom tow rig. That I don't know what aluminum heads you have, but I don't know what it is. But I'm thinking it could easily be 550 or 600 foot-pounds of torque. '92C4 LT1, just finished my engine build. HEI swap, pulls the best vacuum with 24 degrees of initial timing. Trying to figure out how to limit the mechanical advance to 10 degrees for a total of 34. 24 degrees of initial timing? Does it rattle when you shut it off? Replace switches, water pump, coolant sensor, by the pump, not passenger sensor, fuel pump. I felt that the LT1 would have done... I've seen your videos of the Vortek 350, but you've gotten similar power from the Vortek. When did I get similar power from the Vortek? The most I've ever made with a carbureted Vortek 350 would be, on a stock one, would be 310. So it's not making what this LT1's making. Love the LT1, LT4 Gen 2 stuff. Whatever happened to the LT5 they have? They still have it. Been looking forward to that one forever, but the Gen 2 rules. I don't think that that's ever going to run. They want to sell that LT5. So Willie, you had the chambers welded up on the LT4 heads? Junior, thank you very much. Man, I'm going to have all kinds of date night money. Blower rotors are a difficult thing to successfully reverse engineer. It's hard for trying to copy if manufacturing is an outsource there. Particularly, it's not, I don't think it's going to be as hard for them to do root cell blowers, but twin screw stuff is really difficult. .24X reluctor with a crank sensor. Okay. The 1970 LT1 cam grind with good flowing heads at least 10 to 1. Always been a good motor. Yeah. It's interesting that this motor makes about what that 11 to 1 motor with a really big cam made also. What's glitching? Speedmaster aluminum heads, 202, 64cc chamber, 200cc intake ports. Was that the blower thing? I personally thank you, Richard, for the LT1 testing. You're welcome. I enjoyed mine. And I have a 70 LT1 kicking around. Those are cool. I like those only because my first car was a 70.5 split bumper car, and wish that it was a Z28 and always kind of longed. And especially after I did the comparison of the 350 and the 302, and that the bigger motor just makes more power. Funny thing, the L31 Vortex actually were a better head than the LT1 and LT4 head, and better than the bow tie heads at the time. I find it hard to believe that a Vortek head's better than. I'm watching the video on inch and 3/4 versus inch and 7/8 and how the bigger inch and 7/8 lost power down low, but how the 6.2, the bigger headers, made more power down low. Is that correct? I'd have to go back and look specifically at the data. I don't remember. So Kyle, you have a 408 on methanol. It's 11.5 to 1. And the LS3 heads are not ported, right? Oh, valve job and bowl blended. Okay. 260 at 50, 107 LSA. I don't know, mid 600s maybe. Maybe look at the video that I did on the intake test on the LS3 stuff, and you can maybe get an idea from that. Doesn't rattle 24 degrees of initial wind shut off. Is there a kit that limits the mechanical advance to 10, or do I need to do the screw trick? Yeah, you're gonna have to do that yourself. I don't know of any distributor that would limit mechanical advance to only 10 degrees. That would be very unusual for you to be doing essentially what the reverse of what it probably really needs. What does it mean when the LSA says 113 plus 4? It just means the intake center line is moved 4 degrees. It's advanced 4 degrees. So the lobe separation stays the same, but if you look at the, the V in between the two lobes, they just have done this, and that is an advance relative to the piston position. I recommend always taking cylinder heads to a shop to have them looked over. Thanks a lot for the input. Distributor recurve and springs and weights kits, like they're worth the time and effort, in your opinion? They definitely are. I can tell you, on every MSD distributor that we get, that we run on the dyno, we recurve every one of them. We have and for years we just listened to Brule, and he said, hey, look, put the one blue spring and one silver spring and the black bushing in there, and then that's usually the way that they run it. For us on the engine dyno, because like I said, a lot of times they curve distributors so that they're all in by 3,000 RPM anyway, and we're starting a lot of our stuff at 3,000 RPM. They're essentially just locked. Richard, the L31 heads are better than an LT4 head. That came from many cylinder head guys and testing. I would like to see the flow data on that. Have you done a test on an LS turbo with a carb intake and an elbow versus a ram type? Let's see. Have you done a test on an LS turbo with a carbureted intake with an elbow versus a ram air type intake? I don't know what you mean by a ram air type intake, man. So just let me know what you mean about the other intake. So you're talking about putting a carburetor on top, like a blow through application, putting a carburetor on top of a carbureted intake manifold and then blowing through that, right? Versus some kind of EFI manifolds that you're talking about. What if that's what you're asking? You need to be specific about which intake manifold you're talking about. So if you tell me exactly what intake manifolds you want to know about, because there's no universal carb intake, because you can have a single plane, a dual plane, you can have a tunnel ram, you can have all kinds of, you can have a cross ram, you can have all kinds of crazy stuff. And an EFI intake manifold, you can have a billion different kinds of combinations. So I'd need to know exactly which two, and the chances are really good that, that I've probably already tested those two. Bob, you're working on the intercooler again? Just put a fatty alternator in the Mega. It's not a simple install. When does a common man turbo car owner upgrade their boost controller above the basic wastegate and springs with the Holley ECU? Well, have you found a situation where it's not giving you what you want with what you have? So at what point is that becoming too much of a problem and you want to address that? Everyone throw Richard a thumbs up. It's fast and free. So that's the best price of anything, right? Helps the channel grow. Was the LT5 really all that great? I think the LT4 got really good towards the end. Yeah, I mean, I think that the LT5 made more power than an LT4 did. But it was also a million times more expensive too. And you know, if you look at an LT5 and then look at an LS6, you know, an LS6 did what that did for next to nothing. Gino, first time on the live stream, welcome. I just bought a T5 transmission out of a 305 Camaro. Got to hook that to a Ford Mustang. Well, the bell housing is going to be different, and the input spline is going to be different, I think, on that T5. So somebody else let me know here, but I think that that's the case. Sticking dry ice in the intercooler. Okay. Gearhead heaven. That's good. The engine won't idle under 1100 with 18 degrees and only has 7 inches of vacuum. 24 degrees gives 900 RPM idle and 11 inches of vacuum. Does it have a really big camshaft in it or something? The LT5 was the ZR1 Lotus. Yeah, the Lotus Mercury Marine design. Michael, again, it depends on which one you're talking about. Holley makes 3 different versions of that sniper, of that sheet metal intake manifold, and they make 20 or 30 different cast EFI intake manifolds of various configurations and various different lids and stuff. So I don't know which one. The EFI, if you run carburation and port injection on the same manifold, I have that video up. The carburetor makes more power because it has charge cooling that the port injection doesn't really have. So you can, with the same intake manifold, you can make more power a little, and we're talking about just a little bit because of the charge cooling. The intake manifold, if you change the intake manifold, the carburation and EFI thing goes out the window. The big change is the intake manifold design itself. What are the runners like? What is the entry like? All that stuff. And so the intake manifold itself. So go on the channel, look at, if you're looking at LS stuff, look at the different intake manifold shootouts and see how the carbureted manifolds that you like, single plane, dual plane, whatever, compare to some of the EFI intake manifolds. If you're looking at an LS, I can tell you that it's going to be really, really hard to beat a fast manifold if it's a cathedral port LS. On your videos I've seen in the past, the lower LSA has shown to make more torque down low. I wonder why all the bigger motors normally, from what I've seen, their LSAs are 113 to 115. I don't know what you mean by bigger motors. And Junior, LSA doesn't make torque. Valve events make torque. So you can have a tighter LSA and more duration, and it doesn't make more torque. So it's when you're opening the valve relative to piston position that's going to determine whether or not the thing makes more torque or doesn't make more torque. Not LT1, but I found some testing on a turbo 4-liter Jeep Cherokee. That's also cool stuff. Last weekend, it was absolutely, it rips at 15 PSI. It was a little rich though. It was just over 10 AFR under boost. That's plenty safe. But yeah, it could do a little better if it was 11 or even low 11s. 15 pounds on anything is a lot because you're doubling the power output. Understood and good answer, Tim. All I've ever had was a wastegate and springs, never hooked up the Mac valves or used the input. The nice thing that boost controllers do is they keep the wastegate closed until you reach the desired boost. So in that area, as it travels up towards when the wastegate is going to open, that's where you get a big change from having an electronic controller versus a manual controller. because as it ramps up there with the manual controller, it starts opening the wastegate. And so the boost is actually lower as it's transitioning up there, and then it opens all the way, and or as much as it needs to control it. The other way, with when you have pressure on both sides of the wastegate, it just holds it closed until it goes up, and then it goes, oh, okay, now I need to control it. The other way, it's like, oh, something's pushing on me, I need to open up a little bit, and so you'll see a change in power on that way up. And then other things that you would use it for, if you're going to launch it or two-step it or do it different boosts for gears and things like that. That kind of all be cool stuff. Future LT1 Big Bang. I don't think I want to do that, especially on this motor, knowing that it's brand new, but I do want to do a bunch of testing with it. The LT5 was a bad dude, 16 injectors, pretty advanced. Yeah, and a triple blade throttle body. It was pretty awesome. It I'm sure could make a lot more power than they allowed. 236, 242, that's a big cam. I asked about the 4.3 liter TBI with a turbo earlier. I know it needs bigger injectors, regulator, maybe a pump, but could I use an HEI with the throttle body and ECM? I don't know if you can do that. I think that TBI controls the timing too. I don't know if it is only controlling fuel. I don't know what the strategy is for that TBI motor. If it is controlling the timing, then the computer is not going to be happy if you don't allow it to do that. If you try to put a distributor in there that doesn't have control, that it can't control, it's probably not going to run. 95 Impala factory thermostat is 180. Really? That seems low for a factory thermostat. Better be careful with the second gear on the T5 for making a lot of power. Oh, the T5 transmission. Yeah, I never broke mine, and we road raced the dog snot out of it. 305 small block. Did they pay you to take it? Let me get the correct terminology. Hey, buddy, what kind of power? Just ballpark guess. 2007 C6 Corvette, 6 liter, true LS2, 6L80. Or is it a stock one? I mean, wouldn't you know what the stock one was rated at? Can a 305 or 307 block be bored to 4 inches? I don't know. I've never seen anybody measure those to see how thick the bores are. The LT5 was machined and built in a shop with tighter tolerances than what GM used for the LT1 and LT4. Yeah, Mercury Marine was responsible for the LT5 stuff, I think. Cam with the 6L80 from a Camaro. It's a 2011 cam and headers plus an HP tune. Cam a 6.3 lift. The 6.30 lift doesn't really tell me much about the camshaft, though. I need to know what the duration is, and I need to know what you're asking me. Are you asking me how much power that this thing makes? The older 307. I'd like to run a 307 just because it's also other guys. I put a starter on a 9101. Thanks for nothing, Mercury Marine. They had trouble racing those because of stuff like that. They were not very serviceable. 236, 242, 110 going in my Gen 6 454. That should be good. That's like a 284 cam or something like that, or 292 cam or something. Richard, you could use a Holley Sniper and ready to run distributor on your LT1 to control fuel and spark. How am I going to run the distributor on the LT1 intake manifold? Yep, Mercury Marine did the LT5. Drag van, what's going on? I finally got my time of delivery on my rotating assembly for the small block Mopar. Can't wait to get it done. Put it on a dyno 408, 9 1/4. TQ50 Urson cam. Does running the LT1 with a carburetor ruin the value of the test? 82% saying no. That's actually pretty high. I did have the carbureted manifold on it, but that's not going to stop people from saying that, oh, that's that. I get that. I get stuff like that, which is kind of cool. With people in the comments, this test is absolutely worthless. You ran a carbureted manifold on there. This means nothing. Wow. All of that from carburetor hate. Should I buy the 305 with all the accessories for $200? Just needs a carburetor distributor. Should I stick with the 302? Do you have a 302 Chevy? If you have a 302 Chevy, you should stick with that. Richard, 307s are a waste of time. They're not. They're definitely not. They're neat and new and different. Jay, thank you very much. Dude, I'm gonna have to tell Lisa. Oh, I got drink money. Michael, what if you want to pick an intake manifold for a drag race application? What you would do is look at all the videos that I did and figure out what RPM range you're going to be running in your drag race car, and then pick the intake manifold that makes the most power there, the most average power there, and that's going to be the optimum choice. There's lots of different intake manifolds available for lots of different engine families, and they do different things. But long runner stuff typically makes power down low. Short runner stuff makes power up top, and then you have some sort of crossover where one is making more until the other one starts making more, and then you have to decide, hey, look, which one of these is going to get me the thing that I want. The short runner manifold making more power up top. What most guys do is put, if they have an automatic, put lots of converter in it, so it flashes up to where that thing is working well, and they go out and race, and when they shift, it never drops out of the efficiency range of that intake manifold. If you're a street or a street strip guy, you'll want a manifold that makes good power, like up to 6,500 or something like that. And then, like I said, the fast manifold for cathedral port, it's really hard to beat. Tall deck is favorable to run longer rods for better rod to stroke ratio, which will slow piston speed down, which helps friction and better tolerances to use high compression. Okay. Have you done an episode on a tall deck 427? I haven't. I don't know that I've ever seen one. West might have a tall deck big block there. Would a Sniper 2 on an LT1 carb intake perform roughly the same as a carburetor? If you're able to get the air fuel correct and it's adding the fuel where the carburetor does, I think it would be comparable. It probably could even be better. I don't know what the atomization's like on that particular unit. I've seen those not make the power that a carburetor does. And I mean throttle body injections, but I think mostly because they weren't atomizing the fuel the way that a carburetor does. But the nice thing about them is if they could do that, and if you had a system that did that, that would be good. And then also you can adjust it so that at every combination of load and RPM, you could have the right air fuel, which is very, very difficult to do with a carburetor. Although I have to say the Edelbrock VRS carburetor being essentially kind of a 4-circuit carburetor, you can dial it in pretty good, I think. At 350 O's rocket test would be cool. Came with 6-inch rods, and you think that the 6-inch rods are the thing that that get it to make power? Don't get me started on connecting rod length. Seen a couple of great 307 builds. Yeah, everybody said that's why I do 305 videos, quite honestly, is because everyone says, oh, those are junk, just throw those away. And yet it's like a small block Chevy, like a 302 Ford. The only thing that the 302 Ford has is that it has a 4-inch bore. And really what that allows you is way more cylinder head choices, because that's the problem with the 305. Not that it's displacement limited or whatever. It's just that the bore size means that there's only 1 or 2 cylinder heads for it. If it had more heads, and really it has enough cylinder head to make a lot of power. A ported set of trick flow heads for that, the 175s or whatever, if you ported those and did those properly with that bore size, you could make a lot of power with a 305. I remember racing one against I think that the Lozano brothers did that one that we raced against. And I don't know how much power it's making, but it was making a lot more than our 302 was. Have you installed the 408 stroker kit in an LA Mopar? Do you have to do much clearancing for it? I don't think I did that. I think we planned to do that. I was planning on doing that when I did the Dodge, the van motor, but I don't think we ended up doing a stroker with it. So I'm not going to be much help there. I just built a 383 LT4 with a rare LT4 GM carb intake. Oh yeah, that probably is rare, right? Running a carbon HEI. Cool. That should have no trouble burning rubber. Yeah, when the 307 is given to you. I just, again, I have a soft spot for the 307 because a buddy of mine who ended up being the valedictorian when I went to school, he had a Camaro with the 307 in it, and he had a 4-barrel and a 4-barrel intake manifold, and he wanted to get rid of it because he wanted to go back to a 2-barrel. Maybe he was, I don't know, wanted to spend less money on gas or something. I don't think it's really going to do that. But he offered to trade me that induction system for mine, which my car was a base motor with a 2-barrel on it. So we swapped them. And his was a 450 Economaster. So it's a pretty, as carburetors go, it should get pretty good mileage, except when you're in it all the time. Todd, what's going on? It's a 302 out of F-150 going into a 65 Mustang. What's the difference between injection car cam and a carb car cam? There isn't any. You can run any camshaft with injection. You can run any camshaft with a carb. They do the same thing. The camshaft will do what the camshaft does. If it doesn't make good power down low because it's really big and has lots of duration, it's going to do that with a carb and with EFI. That doesn't make any difference. And if it's a good cam down low and stuff and doesn't make any top end, it's going to do that with both carb and fuel injection. When I installed the knock sensor on my 6.0 today, I may have over tightened it because it spun in place after I tightened it. Not the threads, but the sensor itself spun. Does that mean it broke? I think he did break it. Over tight knock sensors toast. Yeah, I've been there. What do you think of the Pro Systems blow through carbs? I never tried one of those. Scrolling back. I never read TikTok comments. Let's see. 307 4-barrel power glide, HG panel van, 100 miles an hour out of first gear. That's a lot. Put a tall deck 427 with an L-Brock multi-port injection in a 78 square body. What do you think of the Pro System? Uh-oh. He's going water boy on me with his medulla oblongata. Been considering a tall deck build. Don't they have Vortek heads for 305? Yeah, the Vortek 5-liter stuff had Vortek specific heads for the 305. The LT5. Jim, what's going on? LT5 is a great engine. With a cam swap out, we could add another 100 horsepower and about 80 foot-pounds of torque. Cool. Jim, who makes the cams? Who makes the cams for the LT5s? Watch the Power TV episode. I think that's the name on a 305 build. They put 400 horsepower. Nice. That's good. Completely unrelated. I'd like to see more 5.9 Magnum testing. Me too. Also been searching for the past hour about an M90 blower on a Magnum. It's going to be hard to make that work on the, maybe we could just mill off all of the, like sacrifice a kegger and just on the mill, or even just bandsaw it really and then mill it. Second gen RAM, 8-liter V10 would be testing would be cool. I'd like to do the V10 2-valve Ford. NASCAR, you're building an 8.1. Cool. I want a twin M90 build. Running 60-pound injectors over recommended pressure to make the 65 to 70 pounds. Yeah, you can do that. I plan on doing the M90 to the 4.3. I don't know. When I was walking through the wrecking yard the other day looking for the sleeve for the LT1, I saw one of the aluminum intakes on the 4.3, which I think is a 2-piece. And so maybe that would work. Otherwise, I'm going to do it with a carbureted intake manifold. Chuck, there should be some videos of that up. How can I get a computer program for my 93 Pontiac Firebird with an LT1? I don't know. My comp 12602-8 said not for use with fuel injection. The reasoning was that it won't make enough vacuum. I think it would be fine. Just take some tuning. Yeah, Special Agent, what size is that 602 cam? The old 350 Rocket was big bore and short stroke. That's nice if you can take advantage of more head flow if you have that. But the bore and stroke thing, displacement, the bore and stroke is way down here for what it does. You clearly had different views on fuel economy and driving. The LA and Magnum have the same deck height, but heads are not compatible. But lots of channels have done Magnum 408s, but not many LA 408s for some reason. I think Dulcich has done those probably, right? You're cooking up some rice, Todd? Christopher says, Chad, use Tuner Cat. I took your advice on the 8.1 496 twin turbo. Wish I could show you pics in the progress of 496. Any more ideas? Please post a buddy. You're very creative. Oh, credible. I like the 8.1s. I want to run that again. I like the Power TV, guys. 292 comp, 42-pound injectors, BBK throttle body, board and stroke, board and polish. Where can I get comp? The computer reprogram and the 3200 stall. Let's see. Man, here we go. LT1 57 Holley aluminum head, stock bottom end, 96 Impala. My father-in-law has an NCRS certified top flight 91 ZR1, white with red interior, 19,000 miles. Nice. Katie, yeah, you got a good 305, right? A turbo 305. That's how to make the 305 really work. I'm all in for a 350 Olds rocket build. Would you want a modified 300 inline 6 upper intake with carb flange epoxied onto it with the throttle body blocked? I don't know if you need the upper manifold. You're going to sell it. Oh, so you've taken the outer section with the throttle body on it and the box, and then you've made carb mounts for the top of it. That's kind of cool. So, Gino, you want to be able to drive it on the freeway and put a cam in it? What intake manifold is on it? I've seen the 4.3 Marine stuff. That is another option, but it's really expensive. £120 injectors to maintain 1,200 horsepower and 85 LQ9, or is 80? 80s won't do that on E85. 80s won't even be close to that. You'll need at least 120s. I don't know if 120s are going to do 1,200. Yeah, 120s probably would do that. It'd be close though. Went to the junkyard today, found a grill for a 64 Impala. Really? That's good. Have you seen the tiny displacement LT1 looking V8s that was popular? Yeah, I have videos up on it. It's an L99 is what it's called. It's a 4.3 liter, yeah. Is a sloppy stage 2 cam that you referenced the Elgin cam brand? The one that I'm talking about is the Elgin one, yeah. What EFI intake manifold elbow do you like for a 351 street-driven turbo car with trick flow stage 1 heads in case I need to remove my ported GT40 tubular and lightning lower? 3000 stall, shift under 6200. I don't know what you mean by elbow. Are you looking for a 90-degree elbow going into a carbureted EFI manifold or something? LT1 versus LT1 on M90. I have a pretty good idea how to build the plate to the kegger manifold, but I thought somebody already made an intake. I asked it 6 months ago and saw a 5.9 with an M90. Can't remember the channel though. Was happy with the quality of the jig sloppy stage 2 when I got it on sale. Yeah, that's actually an Elgin cam. Jegs, I don't know. The Summit one wasn't, or the Trick Flow one was a Summit, was a Elgin cam. Comp 602, 243, 257. That's a big cam on a 107. That's a pretty good sized cam. That's not going to be a daily driver kind of thing. Richard tests the 4.3 V8 versus a 4.3. Oh, Richard tested that. I was going to say, yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. Scott, you got your Super Richie going in? That's good. Have you ever stroked a 350 to 396? No. I'm not sure if they're still being made, but Doug Rippey had someone at Chevrolet working with them, and that's where I got experience with them. Doug and John took them to the next level. Yeah, I remember Doug doing that stuff, and John. There's those cars were fast, and they sound good too when they're all wicked up. Could swapping over to an L-Rock manifold work for an M90 on the Magnum? That's the way that I would do it. I would do it on a dual plane. But it still would be kind of cool to do it on a half a Magnum. Stock 8.1 ported to the max with bigger valve springs. What's your opinion on using those? I don't know. I haven't seen flow data on ported heads to see how much you can change the stock heads. I haven't modded the EFI upper intake yet. I'm going to sell it as is unless you want it for the future. I know you're not doing 300 stuff yet. I am going to, but yeah, I think we can do that. That's just a plate. Edward, thank you very much. I like the laughy guy. That's me at happy hour. And I will have a drink on you. Has anyone ever used an offset double lip 2-piece rear main seal on a big block Chevy? My goal is 1,000 horsepower with the crank LQ9. So if 120 would be peaking at 1,200, should I be good enough? Yeah, if 120s will work for 1,200, they'll work for 1,000. Brick Backyard Brothers is the name of the shop, NASCAR in Texas. I'll make sure I show you the 8.1. Cool. They got some guys out here that are doing 8.1s and 8.8s that are doing cool stuff with them. I'm gonna put the turbo back on the 8.1. Can anyone guide me to the channel with the twin M90 setups? If you just do a search for twin M90s, there should be a bunch of stuff that comes up. I know a guy was doing one on a Ford. The Roadmaster only had the big LT1, not the 4.3. Did it have the iron heads on it too? Good running TBI 4.3 is why I asked, but the plan is to do ported L35 heads, 270 cam, turbo sniper, or new Aces throttle body, maybe 9 PSI. Cool. I saw somebody post something today on somebody that was making, that has an eBay store that was making this regrinding 4.3 cams. So I'm kind of curious about that. Oh, so we've already been here too long. Just running the LT1 with a carburetor ruined the value of the test. 82% saying no. I daily drive the 602 in LA traffic. That's a big cam. Is it a manual trans? Rotter Garages comes up for the twin 90s. So I'm scrolling down. Roadmasters are iron. Yeah, that's what I thought. Mine has the aluminum heads because it's the good one. I don't know if it's a Camaro or Corvette. I don't really know. But on that note, please make sure to I got to mention the guys from Airflow Research and Scat and Vortek and everything because they're helping me out with the channel. Same thing with the guys from Brian Tooley Racing who are awesome as always. But make sure go take a look at the other guys' LT1 video that I just posted. Go up and take a look at it. Show it to 7 or 8 million of your friends. Would be kind of awesome if you each have. I know all of you guys have at least that many friends. So just share it with all those people so they can all go watch that. And then I could have multiple drinks without having people send me drink money. Would be awesome. On that note, but I will be back tomorrow.